I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Tramell Tillman to talk all about Severance. And one of the things that I always love and find so great in your performance is that there's almost these two versions to who he is within the workplace, because there's the version of him that's trying to appease and kind of take care of the innies and, be in charge of his little group of toddlers almost. But then there's also the workplace version of him as to who is he when he is with all of his bosses and his superiors and the people that he's reporting to. And they're very different sides and dynamics because of the different purposes of those moments. And I was interested in kind of how you found those two different elements.
Well, first I have to say thank you so much for pointing that out. I think there's so much energy around the idea that Milchick is just evil, and I believe him to be more complicated than that. He is middle management, even though he has been promoted, but he's still in that middle management stage when it comes to the hierarchy at Lumen. So there's people that he has to deal with, and as you see, he does not carry himself the same way with his superiors as he does with the innies. I think it's very clever that Ben, Dan, and I were able to find how this man is a chameleon of sorts, and he's able to navigate these different rooms and speak in a way to get desired results.
I know, and it also kind of speaks to the fact that I think he's someone who is able to be very controlled and very measured with his emotions. I think we've all worked with those people that have very specific work personas and are very specific about what they'll let out of themselves in the workplace, and that's definitely who he is. And so what was that like in terms of coming in and playing a character who's very intentionally suppressing a lot of things inside all the time?
I get the sense that's the quality you have to have in order to survive at Lumen. We meet Drummond in episode 2, and there's that same stoic energy. It's Sydney, who plays Natalie, has a bit bright facade, but you can tell that there's something beneath the surface. And then, of course, with Cobell, anything goes with her. But so as we're getting introduced to more of the leadership, we notice that there is this quality that Lumen has. Even James Egan that we meet in season 1 has that very stoic, dark, twisted energy. I My imagination is that when Milchick was integrated into the Lumen fold, whenever that happened, that there were things in him that he had to let go of. And as the season progresses, we get introduced to his journey and his leadership and his styles and how he has to fit within the Lumen culture. Playing that was really putting on a suit of armor, because that's not who I am naturally. I'm more expressive and vibrant and vivacious and whatnot in certain ways. So to be able to have all of this stimuli and suppress all of it and be very meticulous and methodical and moving about the space, it was fun, but it's also draining. It's a lot of energy it takes to keep that up.
I also think, to your point of how in this season we're getting to see more of his specific management style, and we're kind of getting to see him kind of like grow into himself a little bit more as a middle manager at Lumen, whatever that may be. But because of that, he was so ingrained in that mentorship relationship with Mrs. Cobell, with Patricia Arquette's character. Um, and there's that aspect of, this is amazing, I've been promoted and now I'm in charge and I don't have to report to her anymore. But then there's also the aspect of, if things go wrong, it all lands on me and I receive all of the criticisms and all of the negativity. And so how have you approached that element of it giving him more confidence, but also making him feel a little bit untethered at the same time?
I always wonder whether or not that confidence is a facade, you know, if it's faux confidence. In my interpretation, Milchick is doing everything that he can to stay focused and keep everything, on the track to meet goal. And we see that he is facing obstacle after obstacle. It seems endless, and especially in season 2, when we see in episode 2 that he has been tapped right after the debacle that took place in the gala. There is no time to really process his promotion. There's no time to celebrate he has to act. And I'm reminded in the scene where Helena and Milchick are meeting in the foyer or the hallway of Lumen Industries, you know, Helena's basically saying, you know, you have to handle this. And Milchick says, well, should I fire them? Let Kier guide your hand. So even in that moment, he has to make the decision as he's preparing to get on this bike to go to the first house. He has to decide whether or not he's going to fire these people and how he's going to go about doing that. So everything just feels is like a snowball effect. And any presentation that he gives, whether it's confidence, whether it's strength, whether it's power, whether it's, you know, authority, you know, what's underneath the surface, I think is so much more engaging. There's so much more storytelling underneath there. Um, and you know, we'll see how it resonates or how it resolves itself in this season.
It also feels like he probably hasn't had even a 5-minute break since all of that happened at the gala. You know, he's making pineapple gift baskets, getting an animation video made for them,
I
showing up to
mean,
all the
break
houses.
room, like all of that. It's like it's an overhaul, and it's all on his shoulders. He has to prove himself, and he hasn't even had the training, I imagine, to be able to do that because Cobell went rogue, she tapped out, and he still had to keep the train going. So it's a lot. It's a lot on him. I don't know if
I
people really appreciate what this man is going through to keep things going.
I love the detail of him showing up at the Audi's houses on the motorbike, though. What was your interpretation, or did that kind of, when you saw that detail, did that just tell you a little bit more that aligned with things that you'd envisioned, or was it a little bit different to what you would have imagined?
It was definitely different from what I imagined. I was not sure how Milchek got around in the town of Kier. We know that Ben Stiller it was a motorcyclist. I think he rode a bike for 20 plus years. And, you know, there was this drive that Ben had that he wanted Milchek to have this cool element, you know. And I thought it would be quite a twist, the fact that he is riding a motorcycle. No one would expect that. But even though you didn't expect it, it makes sense. Like you see him on the bike, you see him in the leather jacket. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I buy that, you know. And these were elements, these were story points that did not exist in season one. And oftentimes we would have the conversation amongst the creative team about who Milchick is outside of Lumen. And now we get a little drop in episode 2 of okay, this man is a cyclist and he's good at it. So it's
And
fun.
and to your point as well, with the fact that he's essentially been told, let Kier guide your hand. So he's kind of creating these interactions and deciding how to keep them in line. I thought the conversation that he has with Mark's outie is so interesting in looking at the way that he specifically tries to control him, even down to using his grief and telling him, your innie has found love, and eventually that feeling will trickle down to something that you're able to feel. And so what are your thoughts, or what are some of the details that you've enjoyed discovering in terms of just seeing how he cedes that control? Because that's very different from we're having an unprompted dance break in the middle of the workday.
It is a bit different. It's a bit different. Now this is mental dexterity. This is tapping into one of the Lumen principles, right? It's the wiles. How does Milchick go about getting people to getting people to do what he wants them to do and appealing to their human nature? And going back and watching that scene, it's it's so creepy and you feel the manipulation, but I see the brilliance. So this man is highly intelligent because again, he just came up with this. There was no time to strategize. I mean, unless he was traveling on bike. I don't imagine that the town of Kier is massive, but it's, so it's like he's not a whole lot of time to really figure out how he's going to approach Mark's Audi, in this world, but he does it and he does it with such humanity and he touches on things that he knows that Mark would respond to. So this is a man who is very cunning, incredibly intelligent, and also has a knowledge base of these outies and is able to tap into that knowledge base at any given moment.
It was also interesting watching the scene where he's there with Mark and with Devon, with Mark's sister, because
Yes.
she's so skeptical and so outwardly so and completely unwelcoming. And so how did you find the way that you felt like Milchick was going to be in that situation? Because, he knows how to manage Mark in a certain way, but then he has this external force that's suddenly infiltrating and messing with his systems.
Well, he knew that he can't come into this room as he would approach the innies. So now this is damage control. This is customer service representative. He's putting on that hat. And what I enjoyed with that scene is working with Jen and Michael, and of course Adam. But because I haven't had the opportunity to work with Jen and Michael, in season one, it was such a delight to work with them. And you could feel the tension in the room. And so there was this game of how do I convince them? How do I push, but not push too much? How do I keep them, engaged? What is it that they know? And what is it that they're willing to trust me with? Um, I wish that we could be flies on the walls of the brains of these characters, because there seems to be an entire dialogue that is happening, an entire monologue. I wonder when Milchick leaves, whether or not he fully believes what Devin and Rickon have to say. It's clear that they are withholding information. And Milchick, in his way, becomes the gentleman and says, without saying it, I'm not going to overstep. I see that there's some residual trauma here. There's some issues. I'm going to step back and give you space and find a way to softly encourage Mark to come back to work by lionizing him and sharing with him that what his innie did was a beautiful thing. You should be proud. Don't reward him with non-existence. You know, it's tricky, that guy. That he's just it's tricky. And watching it, you just know that Devin is like, this is all BS. It's like
Yeah,
I'm
she
not,
doesn't buy
she's
a
not
sentence of it.
buying it. But it's great to be in that, because then that creates more work for me as an actor in the world of, the show.
Yeah. Also, in terms of the way that he is with Helena, with Helly's outie, that kind of almost goes back to what we were talking about the beginning and like these different versions of him. But I was curious as well, like what did that sort of interaction in the script in terms of how he is with her outie also tell you about the way that he has been in terms of controlling her? Because when he's controlling her innie, he's doing it with her outie being his boss, essentially.
That's a sticky situation, right? So how do you tell, you know, an Egan what to do? you know? Um, it does become a delicate balance, and we were finding that balance from day one, right? Because she becomes a part of the innie. And one of the things that we did not want to do is to show deference, Milchick showing deference towards Helly, before the audience realized that she was an Egan. So there was a separation, there was a severing, if you will, where Milchick had the license to be able to treat Helly as an innie, just like everyone else. But when she came out of that, she was Helena Egan, and she is my boss. So there is that switching and playing of roles and power in of itself. And it's also incredibly frustrating. It's got to be for Milchick, because Helly is causing the most havoc. She is the problem innie, and he's having to deal with that, and also knowing that the fact that her outie is who she is, and it's like he can only do so much. I imagine the the moment where Milchick realized that he had to take Helly to the break room, devastated. Had to have been. Like you have to now correct the boss and the founder's like great great granddaughter, right? So this was that's heavy. That's a heavy position to be in. Again, a tough situation to be in.
I also wanted to ask you about just finding that really fine line of balance when it comes to the humor in the show, because I think especially for Milchick, it's not about this show isn't about playing to punchlines of comedy, but it's
Right.
almost creating this comedy through a sense of tension and unease, which seems so specific and delicate and challenging to achieve. And I was just really curious about how you've approached that in the show, or if it is something that you're conscious of, or if you find it easier just to kind of specifically play to what's in the script and that naturally uncovers from it.
Part of it really speaks to the wonderful writing of Dan Erickson and his team, and also the focused direction from Ben Stiller and Sam Donovan and Uta, who have all bravely taken up the reins to lead us in directing various parts of this season. You know, it is a fine line that we're threading because this show could become absurdist in a way. It could become a farce. And while that genre, there's nothing wrong with that. I believe if we were playing for punchlines, it would change the tenor of the show. So for me, it was really important to focus on maintaining the tension, keeping the breath alive, keeping space in between the lines, keeping focus. You know, if this is an exercise in maintaining leadership and authority, it was important to really find ways to keep the innies constantly guessing. And that was the fun part.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you about the thing that you all did at Grand Central in New York in launching season 2, because what was amazing about it was the entire thing was in character, and so I was really interested in, you know, was it helpful to have any conversations about some of the ideas for some of the scene play before going in, or was it pure improv? Because you guys were in there for about 3 hours, and in terms of an acting exercise, I think it's such an interesting thing to be able to do.
So Adam, Zach, and Britt were in there for 3. Myself and Cobell were in there for 2. And it was 100% improv. Patricia and I, when we had a break, we would go backstage in the wings and find things to do. We just started bringing props on into the cube. You know, we're going to do the handbook. Okay. And now Patricia's going to try to fix the computer, which the computer actually broke during the installation. So her going under the table, that was real. Really trying to figure out how to reset the computer. Then there was one time I brought the broom so that Mark could clean up. And now we're resetting and we're going to do story time. So it was really just off the cuff. And what was so great, again, is being with a group of people who were just game for everything, who just jumped in, who were willing to improv. The biggest note that we received was to not break the fourth wall, to not look at anybody, which the cube is glass. So everyone is looking at us and wanting to interact. But, you know, we kept it with inside the cube. And it was such a delight to play in that world and to see the turnout that was there was really fun. I have to say there were some sadists in the audience. Um, as I was escorting people out of the cube at various times, I was really just giving them a break. But as I was taking them one by one, I would hear people say, "Yeah, take them to the break room. Take them to the break room. Get them, Milchick. Get them." And I was like, "Whoa!" And then I remember bringing Adam back in, and then someone would say, "Yeah, how was that break room? How many times do you have to say it?" And I was like, "Okay, all right. They are fiery at this Grand Central Station installation." But it again, it just shows how passionate people are about the show and excited for it.
Yeah, it was an amazing way to promote the new season, which is so phenomenal. The episodes are great. People are going to love them, and congratulations on a great another season.
Thank you. Thank you.